And now we will move to the superintendent's report. Bruce, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Incredible work. We're going to talk a little bit about empowered staff now, as well as empowered student learning and empowered learners. And so at this time, I'd like to invite some friends of mine to come up to the front here. So if we can have Lauren Carter and Jennifer Lopez and Dr. David Ellis from Henry Middle School, and our science specialist from the central office. So I'm going to talk a little bit first and show you some things that they invited me to come and observe that are happening at Henry Middle School that I'm very excited about. As you know, we've been talking a lot about what does learning look like in Leander ISD. We've talked a lot about A.J. Giuliani's quote of our job is not to prepare students for something, our job is to help students prepare themselves for anything. And so as I see examples of what that might look like, I'm trying to showcase those with you. And so I want you to get just a little taste of that today. In this science classroom, this is a 6th grade science classroom that they invited me to go and see. And just to give you some background, they've already been doing a lot of work, experiments with different kinds of cups and how they hold heat and how they hold cool. If this thing will ever work. Thank you. Not only science, but also vocabulary built in, and so they have their own science word wall, which sometimes you only see in elementary classrooms, but I think is extremely important for us in other classrooms too. I'm gonna let somebody else drive this. Are you driving? Okay. Of course, the scientific method, which, you know, it becomes kind of mundane sometimes. You always see it in a science classroom, but when you think about what it really is and how it forces the ownership of learning to the learner, then I think it becomes very important. I think this part of it is extremely important. They have a treatment agreement. You can't see this well here, but this treatment agreement has a lot of statements of what they agree to do with each other and how they agree to treat each other in that classroom. And all of them have committed to it and signed it off. And I think that's really extremely important. But here's the exciting part. These students are working on a demonstration experiment that is being conducted in a whole group. We talk a lot about small group instruction in our classrooms and that being important, cooperative learning. But that's not the only way that ownership of learning can happen. And so in this case, the students are all in one group. They are conducting a single experiment that's being directed by the teacher. This experiment has foil on this front piece. There's butter on the foil. On one side, they have a candle lit underneath the foil, and on the other side, they have placed 2 ice cubes. Those bridges that you see there are actually thermometers that are measuring the temperature at different points of the foil. And what they're struggling with, as you'll see in a second, is what is actually happening here and how can they, as students, figure that out. I want to note a couple of things that you'll see also in this picture. There's individual accountability, so every student has a notebook. They are tracking scientifically in their journal what they're doing. They have tables of data that they're using at some point, and if you listen carefully, you'll hear them reference those. And then I want you to listen very carefully for where is the learning and who is owning the learning in this little example. And so I took a short video in here, and we're going to play that for you.
I want you to think back to your chart table. We have the option for heat moving to cold, cold moving to heat, or heat and cold moving back and forth. With the people that you're sitting by again, look at your data and decide what you think is happening. Is the heat from the candle moving to the cold? Is the cold from the ice moving to the heat? Or do you notice a little bit of both? Talk about that with the people you're sitting next to.
All right, so I've invited Lauren and Jennifer here to talk about the work that they're doing, and then they're going to hand it off to David in a little bit.
And piggyback off of that, that is David's campus, and the partnership that we have really built to make that happen has been good and really hard, but good. And David intentionally has been partnering with our curriculum department, not just science, it was all four of us, and really talking about what his vision is and how our focus aligns with that, and how can we see that out together. So we have been coming together with Jennifer Borland, the instructional coach, David, as well as some of the student success facilitators, and talking about the learning that we have over here with our science leadership cohort. What can that look like on the campus to further his vision? And then we are partnering with leading those conversations in vertical conversations as well as in PLCs. And that is truly, the movement's been great because of that partnership. So to piggyback on what Lauren was saying, it has to be there. We have to work together. And I've really enjoyed that partnership, not just with David's campus, but with others as well.
So David, tell us a little bit about, this is science that we've seen, but this is happening in other places on your campus as well. And then if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about how we spread this to other middle schools in the district and take it from there.
Okay. One I want to tell you is it's not just about science. I am amazed at what our kids are doing in science. I'm walking into 6th grade science and listening to these kids, you're seeing one class, talking about science in a way that you don't hear sometimes in your high schools, about you talking about energy transfer and molecules and stuff that we don't talk about in a 6th grade science class. And I'm seeing the same thing in my 7th science classroom. They're studying life science. They're studying a whole unit where they're trying to figure out what's going on with this child who ends up, and I can spoil it now because they just finished the unit, had celiac disease. But it started with them looking at a bunch of pictures of endoscopies that were around the hallway, and they were just taking notes on what they observed in all of these various real humans endoscopy pictures and things. So here's what I would say. If we're going to prepare our kids for the world they're going into, not the world that we live in, we need to be thinking about what are our kids going to be doing in 2034, 44, 44. And if everything in the world can be found, any content can be found on an internet-connected device for free, what I've been saying is that it's not what people know that's going to matter in the future, it's what they can do with what can be known. And so the trick is not is not so much about how are we getting knowledge into kids, but how are we teaching kids how to think and then use that knowledge in ways. And so it's not just about science. I'm wildly excited about what we're doing in science. But I'm just going to give just a couple of examples of what does that look like when you're thinking about how do we think, how do we communicate, how do we push on ideas, how do we work together to collaborate, how do we probe each other's for ideas, and all of these things, I mean, we know adults that can't do that. So we're actively trying to teach our students how to do it. But you can walk into my 6th grade ELA, there's a purpose for the learning beyond just the factoids. So I just got invited today to come, 6th grade, when we get back from break, is got the library, all of 6th grade is doing a poetry jam. And each kid's reading out their poetry that they've been written. It's at the end of the culminating part of their poetry assignment in 6th grade. And I've been invited to come because they want me to be a guest reader for some of the poetry. My 7th grade, and I know I think Miss Romans came recently, had a Socratic seminar. They finished a unit on dystopian literature because that's a big thing in 7th grade. They're really into dystopian literature. Ask your children. And they did a Socratic seminar where they were wrestling at the end of the unit about 2 questions. Of course, they learned about plot, character development, all of the things you would learn about literature, but the purpose of what they were doing was then chewing on how does dystopian literature inform us about how one person can make a difference in the world. Second part of that question was, how does power influence people? And the conversations that kids had, interpreting what they were doing and then wrestling, those are big ideas for 7th graders. It was awesome to see. You can go to my social studies class in 7th grade. They finished, they did a unit on Texas annexation and the Mexican-American War. But their question, and they learned facts about all of those things. But the question they're wrestling with is, how do you decide when or if the ends justify the means? Because that was an important question about how was Sam Houston approaching it versus Lamar. They then moved into their Civil War Reconstruction. Their first part, they kind of broke it into 2 questions they're wrestling with for Civil War was, how do disagreements lead to conflicts? And the second part, as they were studying about Reconstruction and learning about that, what are the lessons we can learn from that? Again, they learned content, but it wasn't about, do you remember these facts and these things? The question was, how do we resolve conflicts? And a part of that, they had to take that learning and apply it to the conflicts that were in their lives now. And could they do that? 8th grade social studies did a driving question in the American Revolution. How can a rebellion lead to a revolution? But they used the time for their assessment. They had a creative assessment to demonstrate their learning. They had a bunch of ways they could pick out doing it. They had a rubric where they had to do these things in their performance. They had to have a clear definition of a rebellion, 2 or more claims that addressed the driving question, conceptual historical evidence regarding the case and time period. They had to have at least 3 sources of evidence to back it up, an explanation to connect how did your evidence, what's your reasoning for why that answers the question. They had to have a competing viewpoint that acknowledged the other side, and then there was a creativity component of that. They were just teaching kids how claim, evidence, and reasoning came about. Later, recently I said their final assessment on this other one was more writing, because they've been working with claims, evidence, and reasoning. How do you do those? And their question was, during the New Republic era, which foreign or domestic event had the most impact on the United States and why? And it's a blank sheet. Kids gotta put that on there. And they have a rubric that looks at their clear aims, historical evidence, their explanation for how it did, and things like that. I'm gonna finish with mathematics, because I hit all of the subjects there, cool stuff happening. I'm gonna tell you a story that happened in 6th grade mathematics. We've been working with building thinking classrooms. Y'all may have heard about some of that work. Yep, as a part of that, you have vertical non-permanent surfaces. I don't know about you guys, if I'm brainstorming, give me a pen and a whiteboard and it's full up, and we're just standing around doing that. Most of us do that. Well, that's a lot of what's going on in our math classes. I had a guest visitor, took him into a 6th grade math class this last end of the 6 weeks. It was the last day of the 6 weeks. And the boards are set up around the room. They're all set up to do it. I'm walking in and the kids are working. And I said, what are y'all doing today? And they go, we're having a free day. And the teacher goes, well, that's not exactly what we're doing. And they were finishing up their last assignment. She was with a small group table, at a horseshoe table, pulling a small group working on some things. And so they were working on their stuff. And so I'm explaining to this visitor, what are these boards for and what's happening? And the teacher comes up, taps me on the shoulder and says, do you want to see it in action? I said, sure. And so she, real quickly, got all the kids' attention, pulled out her phone, randomized the groups, kids in groups of 3, randomly put up there, went to their board. They threw up a question that had been a leftover question they hadn't chewed on before. Remember, we're shortly after the Super Bowl. And the question was, the Super Bowl sold this many tickets, made this much money, how much profit did they make? And then last year they sold this many tickets, how much money, how much profits did they make? And what was the percentage of increase or decrease? It was a really percentage of increase or decrease problem. So the kids start working on the assignment, and the numbers are like crazy they're big numbers, right? So if you've tried to do long division, most of us would pick out our calculator. They're doing long division, and some of these kids have realized, well, we can drop off the zeros, we'll add them back in later. And so they're working through it, and so I went to this group and said, what are they doing? Have you seen what they're doing over there? Go talk, see what they're doing over there. And they went over there, and they came back and was talking, and the teacher's doing things. And so about 10 minutes later, I stepped back, and I pulled the guy aside and I said, listen to this math class. When was the last time you were in a math class where the whole group, they're all at their boards, they were talking, they were going to other boards and getting information, they were asking questions to the teachers, it was all a hot buzz. And remember, they had a free day. She interrupted their free day to do math. And it was magical. And so I guess the point is, if we focus them on, yes, content's important, but it's not what you know that matters, it's what you can do with what can be known. You organize and teach teachers how does this kind of instruction look? Because we weren't taught that way. I did not teach that way. But it can be done, and it's wildly exciting to see the engagement of the kids, and more importantly, the level of thinking that can come out of their brains when we organize them to do it. And so science is doing some amazing things, and that partnership has been great. And we partnership with all of my specialists on all of these things. But it is not just a science thing, it is a every subject thing. And it's not just a career in technology, and it's there. It is everything, and it's really exciting to see what's happening in Leander schools. So.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Lauren. I really appreciate you. And sitting in the back there is Anna White-Even, and she's part of the motley crew that is taking on all this job. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here tonight. So again, I want to come back to this question of making sure that in all of this, we're really considering this. What do we want learning to look like in our classrooms in Leander ISD? And as we focus on where is the ownership for learning and pushing that ownership wherever possible to the learner, that has to be what drives everything else we do in the district. Documented, very detailed in terms of what our expectations are for what happens with those funds, and we'd be regularly reporting back to the board about what they're used for and the results that we're getting because of that. But if you're interested, I would like to bring that to you at a future time.
So I'll add more words this time. Big resounding yes, because what we saw tonight was amazing. And I think that walking the halls of Henry Middle School and hearing the action that happens, and I know Francesca was like floored. She came back and told us, she was like, you would not believe this. And the learning that goes on, not just from a teacher to student situation, it's student to student, it's student to teacher, it's students together, it's classrooms together. It's how we operate in the world. And if like they said, we're gonna send these kids out in 2034 and 2044, what's the world gonna look like? They have to be able to collaborate with each other. They have to be able to talk to each other and work through problems. And that's what we saw tonight. So, yes, there's the fundamentals of, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that's what we hear about a lot in some of the circles about, get back to the basics. But you know what? The basics aren't what we see in the workplace. The basics have a place. But seeing the learning in action tonight, big resounding yes. Go for it.
I, like Christine, am also a resounding yes. Like she said, I had a chance to go sit through the Socratic seminars with the 7th graders. I've also gotten a chance to see the science curriculum and to see what everybody's doing with the new science stuff in KCAC, and it's incredible. It's very, very different. It's not how I learned how to do science at all. And I think I've said to you before, we have to start doing things differently because the world that I was educated in doesn't exist anymore. These students have to be educated for the world they're going into, just like they were talking about. And if these one-time grants can help supplement these new programs or help our educators to go get more learning for themselves so that they can improve how they're teaching all of these new programs, anything that's going to help us get more education that these students need, I'm totally fine with.
Yep.
So I think Henry School might be one of the best smelling middle schools based on my visiting our Henry Middle School Incubator EDU and the projects they're working on. But seeing those kiddos talk, and then Vista Ridge next door talk, the students talked about how, we just don't want to sit and just hear, sit and get. We want to be interactive. We want to engage. And I love it because it was CTSBA who was visiting. Another trustee challenged and said, yeah, but didn't you do some sit and get to get the basics? And I'm like, oh yeah, for that, but now. And I think that's what it is the basics aren't just the only level. It is compiled in, you get level 1 and then you move them on up. And so I love that. But that situation that I saw, that already has funding. And so that's what I would like to know is later when you start doing this, is I am also a resounding yes. I think committing some fund balance, what amount, we'll want to know, and we'll want to make sure we understand with Pete how that impacts. But also, when you say catalyst for transformation, what projects or what things are you, how would you kind of define it just a touch more? And I do think when you go back to what do we want learning to look like, it is all those things that are in our strategic plan and graduate profile when you put them together in our mission. We want to see the kids do the ownership of learning. We want them to be the most sought after creators of our future world. And I believe what I heard up there is, with the world that they're going into, right? And we want them to have learning experiences that embody the LISD profile, which means interactive, cross-discipline, connecting students to the passion and to a purpose. That's the kind of projects I'm thinking of here. And I think we saw that. I think we're all in a line, but I think it would just be good, clear as kind, who all gets to try for this, so.